The wind howled like a wounded animal through the Colorado mountains, driving sheets of snow against the rickety wagon as it lurched along the frozen trail. Inside, huddled beneath a thin blanket that did little to ward off the bitter cold, Clara Mayfield pressed her bound wrists against her stomach, trying to still their trembling. Whether from cold or fear, she could no longer tell. "Stop your sniveling," growled Jake Harmon from the driver's seat, his voice cutting through the storm. "Ain't nobody gonna hear you out here anyway." Clara bit her lip hard enough to taste copper, forcing back the sob that threatened to escape. 3 days ago, she'd been helping her mother with the washing, planning what vegetables to plant come spring. Now she was cargo, sold like livestock to pay her father's gambling debts. The memory of that night burned worse than the rope against her wrists. Her father, Thomas Mayfield, had avoided her eyes as he counted the money 30 silver dollars, the price of his daughter's virtue. Her mother had wept silently in the corner, too beaten down by years of hardship to protest. "She's a good girl," her father had mumbled to the men who'd come in the night. "Never been touched. That's gotta be worth something extra." "We'll be the judge of that," Jake Harmon had replied, his eyes roving over Clara like she was horseflesh at auction. Behind him stood 2 more men, a Mexican named Rodriguez with gold teeth and dead eyes, and a thin scarecrow of a man they called Whiskey Pete. They were traders, her father had said, though Clara knew better. She'd heard whispers in town about men who supplied the fancy houses in Denver with fresh girls from the frontier, girls who were never seen again. The wagon hit a deep rut, throwing Clara hard against the wooden side. She gasped at the impact, her ribs already bruised from the struggle when they dragged her from her home. She'd fought then, screaming for help that never came, clawing at Jake until Rodriguez had backhanded her into silence. "Best save your strength, little bird," Jake called back, apparently hearing her pained breathing. "Got a long way to Denver yet, and Mr. Morrison don't pay full price for damaged goods." Morrison. The name sent ice through Clara's veins. Even in their small mountain town, people spoke of him in hushed tones, the businessman who owned half of Denver's entertainment district, whose establishments catered to every vice known to man. Once a girl entered his employ, the stories went. She never left. The storm was worsening. Through the canvas covering, Clara could see nothing but swirling white. The horses struggled against the wind, their labored breathing forming clouds of steam that were instantly torn away. Rodriguez rode alongside, barely visible through the snow, while Whiskey Pete had taken shelter inside the wagon bed, reeking of cheap alcohol and watching Clara with bleary interest. "Maybe we should find shelter," Pete suggested, raising his voice over the wind. "Can't deliver her if we're all frozen corpses." "Shut your mouth," Jake snapped. "I know these mountains like my own mother's face. There's an old way station another mile up. We'll rest the horses there." Clara's mind raced. A stop meant an opportunity. The ropes were tight, but she'd been working at them constantly, and the left one had begun to loosen slightly. If they got careless, if they drank enough whiskey to dull their senses. The wagon lurched to a halt so suddenly that Clara slid forward. Jake cursed loudly, and she heard him climb down from his seat. Through the canvas, she could make out shapes moving in the snow. "Trees down across the trail," Rodriguez called out. "Gonna take all of us to move it." "Pete, watch the girl," Jake ordered. "Whiskey," Pete grumbled, but drew his pistol, pointing it vaguely in Clara's direction. "Don't you try nothing, missy. I may be drunk, but I can still shoot straight enough at this range." Clara watched as the 2 other men disappeared into the storm, their voices fading as they worked to clear the path. Pete's attention wandered, the pistol drooping as he took another pull from his flask. This was her chance. With a desperate wrench, she pulled her left hand free from the loosened rope. Pete's eyes widened in surprise, but the whiskey had made him slow. Clara grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy iron skillet from the wagon's supplies, and swung it with all her strength. It connected with Pete's temple with a sickening thud, and he crumpled without a sound. heart hammering. Clara scrambled over his unconscious form and out the back of the wagon. The storm hit her like a physical blow. The wind so fierce she could barely stand. She couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction, but she ran anyway, stumbling through the deep snow. "The girl!" Jake's roar carried on the wind. "She's running!" Clara plunged off the trail into the trees, branches tearing at her dress and hair. Behind her, she could hear shouting and cursing. A gunshot cracked through the air, and bark exploded from a pine tree inches from her head. She ran blindly, her thin dress no protection against the cold that was already numbing her limbs. The ground suddenly dropped away beneath her feet, and she tumbled down a steep embankment, rolling through snow and rocks until she slammed into a tree trunk at the bottom. Dazed and bleeding, Clara forced herself to keep moving. The voices were getting closer. Another shot rang out, the bullet whining past her ear. The storm was her only ally now, hiding her from her pursuers but also threatening to claim her life just as surely. Her foot caught on a hidden root, and she went down hard, face first into the snow. When she tried to rise, her legs wouldn't cooperate. The cold had penetrated to her very bones, and she could no longer feel her feet. This was how she would die, she realized. Not in some Denver brothel, but frozen in the wilderness like a hunted animal. Well, Jake's voice came from directly above her. "Thought you could run from old Jake. Did you?" A boot connected with her ribs, flipping her onto her back. Jake loomed over her, his face twisted with rage. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead where a branch had caught him. "You cost me time and trouble. Girl, mister, Morrison's gonna hear about this, and he don't take kindly to damaged merchandise." He reached down, grabbing a handful of her hair. "Maybe I should sample the goods myself, seeing as how you've caused me such grief." Clara tried to scream, but no sound came from her frozen throat. Jake's other hand went to his belt buckle, and she closed her eyes, praying for the cold to take her quickly. The shot, when it came, seemed to echo forever through the canyon. Jake's grip on her hair loosened, and she opened her eyes to see him staring down at his chest, where a dark stain was spreading across his coat. He took one stumbling step backward, then toppled into the snow. A figure emerged from the storm, a tall man in a long duster, rifle in hand. He moved with the easy grace of someone accustomed to violence, checking Jake's body with his boot before turning to Clara. "You hurt." The voice was deep, roughened by years of frontier living. Clara tried to answer, but her vision was already darkening at the edges. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness claimed her was the stranger kneeling beside her, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. Strong arms lifted her from the snow, and a voice that might have been gentle said, "You're safe now." Then there was only darkness and the dying sound of the wind. Warmth. That was the first sensation that penetrated the fog of Clara's consciousness. Blessed, life-giving warmth that seemed to seep into her frozen bones. She lay still, afraid to open her eyes, afraid that movement might shatter this fragile comfort and plunge her back into the nightmare of snow and pursuit. The crackling of a fire filled her ears, accompanied by the low whistle of wind against solid walls. She was indoors, then safe from the storm. At least, memory rushed back, Jake's hands in her hair, the gunshot, the stranger in the duster. Her eyes flew open. She was lying on a narrow cot, covered by several heavy blankets and what appeared to be a bearskin. The room was small but sturdy, built from thick pine logs chinked with mud. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flames dancing behind an iron grate. Simple furniture filled the space, a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies. A man's dwelling, clearly but clean and well-ordered. "You're awake." The voice came from the shadows near the door. Clara jerked upright, clutching the blankets to her chest, her heart hammering. The man stepped into the firelight, and she got her first clear look at her rescuer. He was tall, perhaps 30 years old, with the lean, weathered build of someone who lived by necessity rather than comfort. Dark hair fell past his collar, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her attention, gray as winter storms, holding a wariness that matched her own. "Easy," he said, raising his hand slightly. "You're safe. Name's Ethan Cross." Clara's throat felt raw, but she managed to whisper, Where are the others?" "The storm will have driven them back to town. If they've got any sense. Man I shot was their leader. From what I could tell. Without him, they won't risk their necks in this weather." He moved to the fire, keeping his distance from her. "You've been unconscious near 2 days. Fever broke this morning." 2 days. Clara looked down at herself, realizing with a start that she was wearing a man's shirt instead of her torn dress. Heat flooded her cheeks. "Your clothes were soaked through," Ethan said, apparently reading her thoughts. He gestured to where her dress hung drying near the fire. "Would have died from the cold otherwise. I kept my eyes closed, if that matters." There was no impropriety in his tone, just matter-of-fact frontier practicality. Still, Clara pulled the blankets higher. "Why did you save me?" she asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Heard the shots, went to investigate, saw what was happening." His jaw tightened. "I've got no tolerance for men who prey on women." I should go," Clara said, though she had no idea where. "I don't want to bring trouble to you." "Go where?" Ethan turned to face her. "Storm's not letting up any time soon, and even if it was, you've got no supplies, no horse, and no knowledge of these mountains. You'd be dead in an hour." The blunt truth of it hit her like a slap. She had nowhere to go. Her parents had sold her. The town would know by now what had happened, even if she could make it back. What life waited for her there? A ruined woman, whispered about, shunned. "I can work," she said desperately. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I won't be a burden." "I don't need a servant," Ethan said flatly. He moved to the shelves, pulling down a pot. "You're welcome to stay until you figure out your next move. No payment required." Clara watched him fill the pot with water from a bucket, his movements efficient and purposeful. Everything about him spoke of solitude, of a man who'd carved out his own space in the wilderness and defended it fiercely. "Are you a trapper?" she asked. "Sometimes I hunt trap, pan for gold when the streams run clear, trade with the Cherokee when they pass through." He set the pot on a hook over the fire. "Mostly I keep to myself. Out here alone." Something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps, quickly shuddered. "That's right." Clara sensed a story there, but didn't press. She had her own secrets, her own pain. Instead, she watched as he added dried meat and vegetables to the pot, creating a simple stew. "I could do that," she offered. "The cooking. I mean," Ethan glanced at her. "You always this determined to make yourself useful?" "My father always said idle hands were the devil's playthings." The words came out bitter, and she immediately wished them back. "Your father, the one who sold you to those men." Clara's silence was answer enough. Ethan stirred the stew with more force than necessary. "A man who'd sell his own daughter ain't worth calling father." Tears burned Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd cried enough in that wagon. No more. "I suppose you think I'm ruined now," she said quietly. "Soiled goods." Ethan turned from the fire, his gray eyes fierce. "I think you're a survivor. That's all that matters out here." Over the next days, they settled into an uneasy routine. Clara insisted on taking over the domestic chores. Despite Ethan's protests, she needed the work, needed to feel useful, needed something to focus on besides the constant fear that Jake's associates would find her. Ethan was a puzzle. He spoke little, moving through his daily tasks with the efficiency of long practice. He'd leave before dawn to check his trap lines, returning with rabbit or deer. In the evenings, he'd clean his rifles or repair equipment, the firelight playing across his weathered features. But there were moments when she caught him looking at her with something that might have been longing, quickly hidden. And once she woke in the night to find him sitting by the fire, staring at something in his hands. A small silver locket that he quickly pocketed when he realized she was awake. "You were married," Clara said one evening as they shared the simple meal she'd prepared. Ethan's hand stilled halfway to his mouth. "What makes you say that?" "The way you fold your clothes. The way you keep everything just so. A bachelor wouldn't care about such things. But a man who'd had a wife." She trailed off, seeing the pain flash across his face. "Sarah," he said finally. "Her name was Sarah. Died 3 years ago. I'm sorry." "A lot of that going around." He pushed back from the table. "I'll get more wood." He left abruptly, letting in a swirl of cold air. Clara sat alone, wondering what had happened to Sarah, why Ethan had retreated to this isolated cabin. She was beginning to understand that they were both running from something. The next morning brought trouble. Clara was mending one of Ethan's shirts when she heard horses approaching. Her blood turned to ice. Ethan appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand. "Get in the root cellar, now!" "But now, Clara." She'd never heard that tone from him before, commanding, dangerous. She scrambled to the corner where a trap door led to the storage cellar, climbing down into the darkness just as voices became audible outside. "Hello, the cabin." Clara pressed her eye to a crack in the floorboards. She could see Ethan step onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. "Help you, gentlemen." 3 men sat their horses in the snow. Clara recognized one of them, Rodriguez, his gold teeth glinting when he smiled. "Looking for a lost girl." Rodriguez said, "Young thing, brown hair, about yay high, ran off in the storm few days back." "Haven't seen anyone," Ethan replied evenly. "Storm like that, girl would be frozen solid by now." "Perhaps, but her body was not found. And Jake, our companion, he is missing also." "Sounds like you've had a run of bad luck." Rodriguez's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "Indeed. You live here alone, Senor." "That's right. It's strange. Know a man choosing such solitude. Perhaps you have secrets to hide." Ethan shifted slightly, and Clara saw his thumb move to the rifle's hammer. "Man's got a right to his privacy." Of course. Rodriguez held up his hands peacefully. "We mean no offense, but Mr. Morrison, he is very anxious to recover his property. There is a reward, $50 for information leading to the girl's return. If I see a lost girl, I'll be sure to bring her to town myself. Collect that reward." Rodriguez studied Ethan for a long moment. "I think perhaps we should search your cabin, just to be certain. I think perhaps you should get off my land." The tension stretched taut. Clara held her breath, her fingernails digging into her palms. Then one of the other riders spoke up. "Come on, Rodriguez, we're wasting time. Girl's probably frozen in a gulch somewhere." Rodriguez's smile never wavered. "Perhaps you are right." He touched his hat brim. "Good day, senor. We will be in town for some days yet, if you remember anything useful." They wheeled their horses and rode away, but Clara remained in the cellar until Ethan gave the all clear. When she climbed out, her legs were shaking. "They'll be back," she said. "Maybe." Ethan was checking the loads in his rifle. "Maybe not. Depends how bad this Morrison wants you." "Bad enough?" Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm putting you in danger. I should leave." "We've been through this. You've got nowhere to go." "That's not your problem." Ethan set down the rifle and turned to face her fully. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw real anger in his eyes. "You think I saved you just to throw you back to the wolves? You think so little of me?" I think you're a good man who doesn't deserve to die for a stranger's troubles. Let me worry about what I deserve." He stepped closer, and Clara caught her breath at the intensity in his gaze. "You're under my protection now. That means something out here." They stood there, the space between them charged with an electricity Clara didn't quite understand. Then Ethan seemed to catch himself, stepping back. "I need to move the horses to the hidden corral," he said roughly. "Case those men circle back." He left quickly, and Clara sank into a chair, her heart still racing. She was beginning to realize that the danger from Rodriguez and Morrison might not be the only threat to her carefully guarded heart. The days following Rodriguez's visit passed intense vigilance. Ethan had moved their horses to a hidden canyon a half-mile from the cabin, and he'd taken to sleeping in shifts, always keeping watch. Clara noticed how he checked and rechecked his weapons, how his eyes constantly scanned the tree line when he was outside. "You can't keep this up forever," she told him one morning as he prepared to check his trap lines. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from lack of sleep. "Don't need to, just until they move on." He shrugged into his coat, then paused. "I've been thinking, you should learn to shoot." Clara blinked in surprise. "I've never held a gun in my life." "All the more reason to learn. Out here, a woman who can't defend herself is at the mercy of whoever comes along." His jaw tightened. "As you've already discovered." That afternoon, he set up targets, old cans and bottles on a fallen log behind the cabin. He started her with an old Navy Colt, showing her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze rather than jerk the trigger. "It's heavier than I expected," Clara said, her arms trembling as she tried to hold the weapon steady. "You'll build strength. Here." He moved behind her, his hands covering hers on the grip. "Relax your shoulders. Breathe out slowly as you squeeze." Clara was acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth of him at her back, the steadiness of his hands guiding hers. When the gun fired, she jumped despite herself, but the can went flying off the log. "I hit it!" She turned in excitement, finding herself nearly in his arms. For a moment, they stood frozen, her face tilted up toward his. Then Ethan stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good shot. Try again." They practiced every day, and Clara found she had a natural eye for it. But more than the shooting itself, she treasured these moments of closeness, of Ethan's patience as he taught her not just marksmanship but woodcraft, how to read tracks in the snow, how to move quietly through the forest, how to find her way by the stars. "Why are you teaching me all this?" she asked one evening as they skinned rabbits for dinner. "Because you need to know it." "That's not what I meant." She set down her knife. "You could have just kept me here until the danger passed, then sent me on my way. Why take the time?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his hands still working automatically. "My Sarah," he said finally. "She didn't know these things. Grew up in town, married me young. I always meant to teach her, but there was always tomorrow." His voice roughened. "Until there wasn't." Clara waited, sensing there was more. "Cholera took her while I was away on a hunting trip. Found her when I got back. If she'd known how to doctor herself, how to find the right herbs." He shook his head. "I won't make that mistake again." "How did you end up out here?" Clara asked gently. "After Sarah died, I couldn't stay in town. Too many memories. And there was trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Ethan's hand stilled. "The kind that comes from putting a bullet in the man responsible for bringing cholera to town. He knew his wagon train was infected, but he kept quiet to make his profit. 23 people died, including Sarah." "You killed him." "I did. His brother was the territorial judge. Made it clear I could hang or disappear." He resumed working, his movements sharp. "So, I disappeared." Clara absorbed this information, understanding now the depth of pain that had driven him to this isolated life. "Do you regret it?" "Killing him no man was a murderer, even if the law didn't see it that way. He glanced at her. Does that frighten you? She thought of Jake's hands and her hair, of what would have happened if Ethan hadn't arrived. No, I think justice comes in many forms. Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that made her pulse quicken. But before either could speak, they heard it, horses approaching fast. "Cellar," Ethan commanded, already reaching for his rifle. But this time Clara grabbed the Navy Colt from the table. "No! You said it yourself. I need to be able to defend myself." "Clara, they're here for me. I won't hide while you face them alone." There was no time to argue. The riders burst into the clearing. Rodriguez and 4 men, including Whiskey Pete with a bandage around his head. They didn't bother with pleasantries this time. "We know she's here. Cross," Rodriguez called out. "Found her tracks near the creek. Girl's footprints, small and fresh." Ethan stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. "Already told you, I haven't seen any girl." "Then you won't mind if we search your cabin?" Rodriguez dismounted, hand on his pistol. "I mind plenty. This is private property. Mr. Morrison, he owns the law in 3 counties. Rodriguez said, "Your property rights mean nothing to him. Give us the girl, and we leave peacefully. Otherwise—" He shrugged eloquently. Clara made her decision. Before Ethan could stop her, she stepped out beside him, the Colt held steady in her hand. "I'm not going back," she said clearly. "Not to Morrison, not to anyone." Rodriguez's gold teeth flashed. "Ah, señorita, you have caused us much trouble, but look, you have found yourself a protector. How touching." "The lady said she's not going," Ethan said quietly. "I'd take her at her word." 1 man against 5. These are not good odds. My friend wouldn't be so sure about that. Ethan's voice carried the calm certainty of a man who'd faced death before. "I've got the high ground. Good cover. And a repeating rifle. You're sitting in the open like ducks on a pond. How many of your men are ready to die for Morrison's money?" Clara saw uncertainty flicker across some of the riders' faces. These were hired guns, not zealots. "Besides," she added, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice, "I'm the one Morrison wants untouched. If shooting starts, I might catch a bullet. How much do damaged goods bring these days?" "Rodriguez." The Mexican's smile faded. He hadn't expected resistance from the girl herself. "You would rather die than come with us." "Yes," the word came out firm and final. "I've been sold once, never again." A tense silence stretched across the clearing. Clara kept the Colt trained on Rodriguez, though her arm was beginning to tremble. Beside her, she felt Ethan coiled like a spring, ready to move. Finally, Rodriguez stepped back toward his horse. "This is not over, mister. Morrison does not forget, and he does not forgive. You have made an enemy today, both of you." "Get used to disappointment," Ethan replied. Rodriguez mounted his horse, but his eyes never left Clara. "Such spirit! What a waste! You would have fetched a high price in Denver." "The only price you need to worry about," Clara said, "is the one on your head if you come back here." The Mexican laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We shall see, little bird, we shall see." They rode away in a thunder of hoofbeats, and Clara finally lowered the gun, her hands shaking. Ethan took it from her gently. That was either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. She was trembling all over now, reaction setting in. "They'll be back, won't they, with more men?" "Probably." He studied her face. "You meant it? Didn't you about dying rather than going with them?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then we'd best be ready." They spent the rest of the day fortifying the cabin. Ethan showed her where he kept extra ammunition, taught her to reload quickly, pointed out the best positions for defense. As they worked side by side, Clara felt something growing between them, not just trust or gratitude, but a partnership forged in shared danger. That night, as they kept watch by turns, Clara found herself studying Ethan's profile in the firelight. He was not handsome in the conventional sense. His face bore too many lines of hardship. His hands were too scarred from work. But there was strength in him, and kindness beneath the rough exterior. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked without turning from the window. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I was just thinking about how different you are from what I expected when I first woke up here." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Another man looking to take advantage. I suppose that's all I'd known." He turned to face her then. "Not all men are like your father or Morrison's dogs." "I'm beginning to understand that." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever get lonely out here?" "Used to. Got used to it after a while." "And now?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Now I'm reminded what I've been missing." Their eyes met across the dim room, and Clara felt her breath catch. But before either could speak further, a wolf howled in the distance, breaking the spell. "You should get some sleep," Ethan said roughly, turning back to the window. "Tomorrow I'll teach you to use the rifle." Clara retreated to her corner, but sleep was a long time coming. She lay listening to the crackle of the fire and the sound of Ethan's breathing, wondering how a place that should feel like a prison was beginning to feel like home. The next morning brought fresh snow, and with it, a temporary reprieve. The passes would be difficult to navigate, buying them time, but Clara knew it was only a delay. Morrison's men would return, and when they did, there would be blood. "We could leave," she suggested as they practiced with the rifle. "Head north, maybe Canada." "Running's not always the answer," Ethan replied. "Sometimes you have to make a stand, even if it gets you killed." He lowered the rifle, looking at her intently. "There are things worth dying for. Freedom, justice." He paused. "People you care about." Clara's heart stuttered. "Ethan." "I know you'll move on when this is over," he said quickly. "Find a town where nobody knows you. Start fresh. But until then, I'll keep you safe. You have my word on that." She wanted to tell him that leaving was the last thing on her mind, that this rough cabin felt more like home than her father's house ever had. But the words stuck in her throat, held back by fear and uncertainty. Instead, she raised the rifle again. "Show me one more time how to compensate for wind direction." He moved behind her, guiding her aim, and Clara closed her eyes briefly, memorizing the feeling of safety in his presence. Whatever came next, she would face it. They would face it together. The storm Rodriguez had mentioned was coming, but for now, in this moment, with Ethan's steady presence at her back and his patient voice in her ear, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The first warm day of spring arrived like a blessing, melting the snow from the pine boughs and setting the mountain streams to singing. Clara had been with Ethan for nearly 2 months now, and the rhythm of their shared life had become as natural as breathing. The threat from Morrison's men had faded with the winter storms, though both knew it was only a temporary respite. "Water barrel's getting low," Ethan observed over breakfast. "Need to make a trip to the river." "I'll come with you," Clara said quickly. She'd grown comfortable with the daily routines, but the memory of Rodriguez's visits still made her nervous when Ethan left her alone. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Might do you good to get out. Been cooped up too long." They set out after the morning meal, Ethan carrying the empty barrel while Clara brought the water buckets. The path to the river was steep and winding, following an old game trail through stands of aspen just beginning to bud. Clara found herself humming as they walked, a half-remembered tune from childhood. "I haven't heard you sing before," Ethan commented. She flushed. "I didn't realize I was... My mother used to say I had a pleasant voice, but Father didn't approve of idle entertainments." "Nothing idle about music. Makes the work go easier." He shifted the barrel on his shoulder. "Sarah used to sing while she cooked. House feels too quiet without it." It was the most he'd spoken of his late wife in weeks. Clara had learned not to press when he mentioned Sarah, but she treasured these glimpses into his past. The river, when they reached it, was running high with snowmelt, crystal clear and achingly cold. The sun sparkled on the rushing water, and the air was filled with the sound of it tumbling over rocks. Ethan set down the barrel near a calmer pool where they could fill it safely. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed, taking in the scene. Across the river, a doe and her fawn had come to drink, watching them warily. "One of the reasons I chose this spot," Ethan said, kneeling to fill the first bucket. "Far enough from town to be left alone, but close to fresh water and good hunting." Clara moved to help him, but the rocks near the water's edge were slick with spray. Her foot slipped, and she felt herself falling toward the icy current. Before she could cry out, strong hands caught her waist, pulling her back to safety. "Steady there," Ethan said, his hands lingering just a moment longer than necessary before he released her. "Current stronger than it looks." Clara's heart was racing, though whether from the near fall or his touch, she couldn't say. "Thank you. I should be more careful." "Here." He took her hand, guiding her to a more stable spot. "Put your foot on that flat rock. That's it." His hand was calloused and warm, encompassing hers completely. Clara looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. He was closer than she'd expected, close enough that she could see flecks of blue in his storm-gray eyes. "Ethan," she said softly. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. His free hand came up, hesitating just shy of her cheek. "Clara." He stopped, struggling with words. "These past months, having you here, it's been like waking up after a long sleep. But you're young, and you've been through enough. I won't be another man who takes advantage." "You're not," she said firmly. "You're nothing like them. You're kind and patient and—" She took a breath, gathering courage. "And I've never felt safer than I do with you." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a feather-light touch that sent shivers through her. "You deserve better than a broken-down soldier hiding in the mountains." "I deserve to choose for myself," Clara countered. "And I choose." The words died on her lips as he leaned closer, moving with aching slowness, giving her every chance to pull away. But Clara didn't want to pull away. She tilted her face up, her eyes fluttering closed. His lips touched hers with infinite gentleness, as if she were something precious that might shatter. Clara had imagined her first kiss many times, in the way young girls do, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of it. The warmth of his mouth, the scratch of his stubble, the way one hand came up to cradle her face while the other still held hers. It was a kiss of questions rather than demands, seeking permission with every movement. Clara answered by leaning into him, her free hand coming to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart beating as fast as her own. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted roughly. "Since the day you stood beside me with that Colt in your hand, ready to face down 5 men rather than surrender. Why didn't you?" "Because you needed a protector, not another complication. Because you're 18 and I'm 30. Because—" Clara silenced him with another kiss, brief but firm. "Stop finding reasons why we shouldn't and tell me why we should." He pulled back enough to look at her, his hand still cupping her face. "Because you make me want to be the man I was before grief hollowed me out. Because your courage humbles me. Because when I think of you leaving, it feels like losing Sarah all over again." Tears pricked Clara's eyes. "I don't want to leave. Not ever." "Clara." "I mean it. I know it's only been 2 months, and I know people would say it's too fast or that I'm too young to know my own mind. But I've lived more in these 2 months than in all my 18 years before. You taught me to be strong. You showed me what it means to be valued for who I am, not what I can provide." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. If you stay, it won't be easy. Morrison's men will come back eventually. The town already has opinions about me, and this life, he gestured at the wilderness around them. It's hard, lonely, not what a young woman dreams of. I used to dream of a house in town with lace curtains and tea parties, Clara admitted. But dreams change. Now I dream of waking up to coffee you've made too strong, of mending clothes by the fire while you clean your guns, of building something real with a man who sees me as a partner, not property. Is that what we are, partners? If you'll have me. Instead of answering with words, he kissed her again, deeper this time, but still achingly gentle. His hands framed her face like she was something precious, something to be cherished rather than possessed. Clara melted into him, her arms winding around his neck. The river sang beside them, witness to promises made without words. When they finally remembered the water barrel, both were flushed and slightly dazed. They worked in companionable silence, stealing glances and small touches, his hand on her elbow to steady her, her fingers brushing his as she passed him a bucket. We should head back, Ethan said finally, but he made no move to leave. We should, Clara agreed, equally reluctant. They stood there a moment longer, hands linked, watching the river race past. Then Ethan squeezed her hand and released it, shouldering the now full barrel. Come on, partner, let's go home. Partner, home. The words wrapped around Clara's heart like a promise. As they made their way back up the trail, she found herself humming again, not from mere contentment this time, but from joy. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, there was a new ease between them. Small touches came naturally now, his hand on the small of her back as he reached past her for a plate, her fingers brushing hair from his forehead. They didn't speak of what had changed, but it hummed in the air between them like electricity before a storm. I've been thinking, Ethan said as they ate. Come full spring, we should go to the Cherokee trading post, get you some proper clothes, supplies for the warm months. You mean, I'll still be here in spring. He looked at her across the table, his expression serious. If that's what you want, but Clara, I need you to be sure, this isn't just about staying until the danger passes anymore. This is about... I know what it's about, she interrupted softly, and I'm sure... He reached across the table, and she met him halfway, their fingers intertwining. Then we'll face whatever comes. Together. That night, as Clara lay in her usual spot by the fire, she heard Ethan moving restlessly on his cot. After a while, he spoke into the darkness. That locket you saw me with, it was Sarah's, had her portrait inside. Clara held her breath, sensing the importance of this moment. I buried it today, he continued. Down by the river, after figured it was time to let the past rest. She would have liked you, I think, would have wanted me to be happy. Ethan, just wanted you to know, wanted you to understand that this isn't about replacing her or forgetting. It's about choosing to live again. Choosing you. Clara rose from her blankets and crossed the room, kneeling beside his cot, in the dying firelight. She could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that he'd said too much. Thank you for telling me, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Thank you for choosing to live. He caught her hand as she started to pull away. Stay close tonight. She settled beside the cot, her hand in his, and they talked quietly until dawn, about everything and nothing, about dreams and fears and all the tomorrows stretching ahead. And when the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The river had witnessed more than a first kiss. It had witnessed the beginning of a love that would prove stronger than all the forces arrayed against it. Morrison and his men would come, bringing violence and threats. The town would whisper and judge. But here in this cabin, two wounded souls had found healing in each other, and that was worth any price. Clara hummed as she started breakfast, and Ethan smiled to hear it. The house no longer felt too quiet. It felt like home. The storm struck without warning. Clara had seen mountain weather change quickly before, but nothing like this. One moment the April sky was clear. The next, black clouds rolled over the peaks like an avalanche of darkness. The temperature plummeted so fast she could see her breath between one heartbeat and the next. "Ethan," she called from the porch, watching him sprint from the woodshed as the first fat snowflakes began to fall. By the time he reached the cabin, the snow was coming sideways, driven by a howling wind. "Late season storm," he said, shaking snow from his coat. "Seen a few like this. They blow in fast and hard." His expression was grim as he surveyed their wood pile. "We've got maybe 2 days' worth inside. Didn't expect to need more this late in the season." Within an hour, the world outside had vanished behind a solid wall of white. The wind screamed like a living thing, battering the cabin walls and sending snow through every tiny gap in the chinking. They worked together to stuff rags in the cracks, but the temperature continued to drop. "We need to conserve wood," Ethan said, banking the fire down to barely glowing coals. "No telling how long this will last." Clara nodded, already pulling on every layer of clothing she owned. Even so, the cold was a physical presence, seeping through the walls and floor, turning their breath to fog. They moved their bedding close to the fireplace, creating a small island of relative warmth. By nightfall, ice had formed on the inside walls. They huddled together under every blanket and fur in the cabin, sharing body heat as the storm raged on. Clara had never been this close to him for so long, and despite the circumstances, she was acutely aware of every point of contact. "Tell me about your childhood," she said, partly to distract herself from the cold and partly to ease the strange intimacy of their position. "Before the war." Ethan's arm tightened slightly around her. "Not much to tell. Grew up on a farm in Ohio. 3 brothers, 2 sisters. I was the youngest boy." "A big family, that must have been nice." "It was." His voice carried a distant warmth. "Chaotic, but good. My mother could make a feast from almost nothing, and my father, he was a hard man, but fair, taught us the value of work and keeping your word." "Do you ever think about going back?" "Nothing to go back to. Parents died while I was away fighting. Siblings scattered to the wind. The farm was sold for taxes." He paused. "That's how I met Sarah. Actually, her family took over our old place. I went back to see it one last time. And there she was, hanging laundry in what used to be my mother's garden." Clara could hear the smile in his voice at the memory. "Love at first sight." "More like irritation at first sight. I was angry that strangers were living in my home. She told me to stop scowling like a thundercloud and help her with the laundry basket." He chuckled softly. "Nobody had spoken to me like that since before the war. I was so surprised I actually did it." They talked through the night, sharing stories as the storm battered the cabin. Clara told him about the time she'd tried to run away at 12, only to get lost and have to be rescued by the very parents she was fleeing. Ethan shared memories of his brothers teaching him to track and hunt, skills that had saved his life more times than he could count. By the second day, they'd burned through half their remaining wood. The storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it seemed to be growing stronger. Snow had drifted up to the windows, turning the cabin into a cave of darkness lit only by the meager fire. "We're going to have to make a choice soon," Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. "Burn more wood and risk running out, or let the fire die down further and risk freezing." Clara's teeth were already chattering despite the layers of clothing and blankets. "What would you do if I weren't here?" "Probably something foolish, like try to make it to the woodshed in the storm." "Then it's good I'm here to keep you from being foolish." She burrowed closer to him. abandoning any pretense of maintaining proper distance. Survival trumped propriety. We let the fire die down. We have each other for warmth. He was quiet for a moment. Clara, I need you to understand something. The cold, it can make people do things they wouldn't normally do. Make decisions based on necessity rather than... Ethan Cross, are you trying to protect my virtue in the middle of a blizzard that might kill us both? I'm trying to make sure you don't have regrets later. She pulled back enough to look at his face in the dim light. The only thing I'd regret is freezing to death while maintaining a proper distance from the man I love. His breath caught. Love? Yes, love. I love your stubborn nobility and your terrible coffee. I love how you hum when you're concentrating and how you check the perimeter 3 times before bed. I love that you're trying to be honorable even now. She cupped his face with one cold hand. I love you, Ethan Cross, and if this storm takes us, I want you to know that these months with you have been worth everything that came before. He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. Clara, God help me. I love you too. Fought against it for weeks. Told myself I was too old, too damaged, too dangerous for you. But you walked into my life and lit it up like sunrise after the longest night. They kissed then, deep and desperate, pouring all their fear and love and hope into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Whatever happens, Ethan said roughly, we face it together. They reorganized their makeshift bed, pressing as close as physically possible. The fire died to barely embers, just enough to keep the worst of the killing cold at bay. Clara had never been this intimate with anyone, feeling the length of Ethan's body against hers, sharing breath and warmth and the rapid beating of their hearts. Are you afraid? She whispered into the darkness. Not of the storm, he replied. I am afraid of failing you, of not being strong enough to keep you safe. You've already saved me, not just from Morrison's men, but from becoming someone hard and bitter. You showed me that strength doesn't mean being alone. They held each other through the endless night, taking turns sleeping fitfully while the other kept watch. By the third dawn, their wood was nearly gone, and the cold had become a living enemy, stealing feeling from fingers and toes despite their closeness. The storm's weakening, Ethan said, listening to the wind. But we need heat soon. Clara's lips were blue, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. Ethan wasn't much better, ice forming in his beard from his breath. They were approaching the point where sleep would mean death. There's furniture, Clara said through chattering teeth. The table, the chairs. We can burn them. That's my girl, Ethan said with fierce pride. Always thinking. They broke apart long enough to break up a chair, feeding the pieces to the dying fire. The flames leaped up greedily, providing a burst of life-saving warmth. They burned through the furniture piece by piece as the storm finally began to exhaust itself. By afternoon, weak sunlight was filtering through the snow-covered windows. The wind had died to occasional gusts. Ethan forced his way out the door, having to dig through a drift that reached his chest. Clara watched anxiously as he fought his way to the woodshed, returning with an armload of blessed dry wood. We made it, he said, dropping the wood by the hearth. His hands were shaking so badly, Clara had to help him arrange the logs. We made it, she agreed, tears of relief streaming down her face. As warmth slowly returned to the cabin, they sat wrapped in blankets, sipping the hot coffee Clara had made with shaking hands. The everyday comfort of it felt miraculous after their ordeal. I meant every word, Clara said quietly. Everything I said during the storm. So did I. Ethan set down his cup and took her hands. Clara, I know this isn't how these things are usually done, but nothing about our situation is usual. I don't have much to offer. A hard life, a dangerous past, and a cabin that apparently can't stand up to a late-season storm. But if you'll have me... Yes, she interrupted. Whatever you're asking, yes. You don't even know what I was going to say. Doesn't matter. My answer is yes. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Stubborn woman, I was going to ask if you'd marry me, make this partnership official in the eyes of God and man. Then my answer is definitely yes. She threw her arms around his neck, nearly upsetting both their coffee cups. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They held each other there in the warming cabin. Storm survivors who had found something worth living for in each other. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, setting the snow-covered world to sparkling like diamonds. When? Clara asked, pulling back to look at his face. How? Soon as the pass is clear, we'll go to town. Find a preacher. His expression darkened slightly, though that might bring its own troubles. People talk. And Morrison. Morrison be damned. Clara said fiercely. We've survived my father, his hired dogs, and now this storm. We can survive gossip and threats too. Ethan traced her face with one finger. Wonder in his eyes. How did I get so lucky to find you? I think we found each other, Clara corrected. Two broken people who make a whole. They spent the rest of the day recovering from their ordeal. But there was a new lightness between them, a joy that not even exhaustion could dim. They had faced death together and chosen life. Everything else seemed small in comparison. That night, as they prepared for bed in a properly heated cabin, Ethan caught Clara's hand. During the storm, when I thought we might, I kept thinking about all the things I should have said. Time I wasted being noble and keeping distance between us. We have time now, Clara said softly. All the time in the world. Not nearly enough, he replied, pulling her close. But I intend to make the most of every moment. They had survived the storm, but more than that. They had found in each other the strength to survive whatever came next. Morrison and his threats seemed distant compared to the immediate reality of their love. Forged in hardship and tested by ice and wind. The storm had passed, leaving the world clean and new. And in a small cabin in the Colorado mountains, two hearts beat as one, warming each other against all the cold the world could bring. The morning started like any other. Clara was kneading dough for the day's bread, while Ethan repaired a harness at the table. Spring had fully arrived, filling the air with bird song and the scent of wildflowers. They'd been making plans to ride to town next week, to see the preacher, to make their union official, to face whatever judgment awaited them there. Maybe we should get you a new dress for the wedding, Ethan suggested, looking up from his work. Something fitting for a bride. Clara smiled, flour dusting her hands. I don't need anything fancy, just you and a preacher who won't ask too many questions. You deserve fancy. You deserve... The sound of approaching horses cut him off. Many horses, moving fast. Ethan was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. Through the window, Clara could see riders emerging from the tree line. 8, maybe 10 men, spreading out to surround the cabin. The cellar, Ethan commanded, but Clara was already moving to the gun rack. Not this time. She grabbed the Winchester he taught her to use. We knew this day would come. Rodriguez rode at the head of the group, but it was the man beside him who drew the eye. Tall and broad, dressed in an expensive suit despite the wilderness setting, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. Morrison. He'd come himself. Mr. Cross. Morrison's voice boomed across the clearing. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Ethan stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. Clara took position at the window, her weapon trained on Rodriguez. Nothing here belongs to you, Morrison. Ethan called back. Now, that's where you're wrong. Morrison dismounted with surprising grace for such a large man. I paid good money for that girl. 30 silver pieces to her loving parents. That makes her mine by right of purchase. Last I checked, this was still free territory. We don't trade in human beings here. Morrison laughed, an ugly sound. How noble. Tell me, Cross, do you know what she is, a runaway, damaged goods? Her own father sold her rather than bear the shame of her willfulness. I know exactly who she is, Ethan replied steadily. She's the woman I'm going to marry. That makes her under my protection. Marry? Morrison's eyebrows rose. Well, isn't that touching? The murderer and the harlot, playing house in the wilderness. Clara saw Ethan's knuckles whiten on the rifle stock, but his voice remained calm. Choose your next words carefully. Morrison, or what you'll shoot me like you shot Judge Harrington's brother. Oh yes, I know all about you. Cross, quite the pair you make, a killer and a runaway. Morrison smiled coldly. Here's my offer. Give me the girl, and I'll let you live. You can go back to your hermit existence. No harm done. Refuse, and my men will burn this cabin to the ground with both of you in it. Here's my counteroffer. Clara called from the window, her voice carrying clear and strong. You and your men ride away now, and we won't turn this clearing into a graveyard. Morrison's gaze swung to her, and Clara felt the weight of his attention like something slimy. Ah, the merchandise speaks. You've developed quite a spine. My dear, I have clients who pay extra for spirited ones. You'll fetch an even better price now. The lady made our position clear, Ethan said. I'd take her at her word. She's become quite the marksman. 10 men against 2, and one of them a slip of a girl. Morrison shook his head. I've been patient. Cross, I could have had the territorial marshal here weeks ago with a warrant for harboring a runaway, but I preferred to handle this privately. Less paperwork. You mean less witnesses, Ethan corrected. That too. Morrison's affable mask dropped, revealing the predator beneath. Enough talk. Rodriguez, burn them out. Everything happened at once. Rodriguez reached for a torch, and Clara's rifle cracked. The Mexican spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. Ethan's shot took another man from his saddle as the clearing erupted in gunfire. Clara dropped below the window as bullets shattered the glass above her head. She could hear Ethan firing steadily from the porch, using the thick log walls for cover. She crawled to another window, rose up, and fired at a man trying to circle the cabin with a burning brand. He went down, the torch rolling harmlessly in the dirt. The north side, Ethan shouted. Clara spun to see 2 men approaching from that direction. She fired twice, missing once but sending both diving for cover. Her hands were steady despite the chaos, all those hours of practice paying off. A cry of pain, Ethan. Clara's heart lurched as she saw him stumble back, blood spreading across his left sleeve. He kept firing one-handed, but more men were advancing. Inside, Clara yelled. Ethan backed through the door, and Clara slammed it shut, dropping the heavy bar into place. Bullets thudded into the thick wood like deadly hail. How bad? She asked, grabbing cloth to bind his wound. Clean through. I'll live. He grimaced as she tied off the bandage. Counted 5 down. That leaves 4 or 5 more. Morrison. Staying back, letting his dogs do the work. Smoke began seeping through the walls. They'd managed to get fire against the north wall. Clara grabbed buckets of water, dousing the spots where flames tried to catch, but more smoke was coming from the roof. They're up top, Ethan said grimly. The smoke thickened rapidly. Soon they'd have to choose burn or face the guns outside. Clara's eyes were streaming, her lungs burning. I'm sorry, Ethan said roughly. I should have taken you away from here. Should have... Don't you dare. Clara gripped his good hand fiercely. We make our stand together. Remember. He kissed her hard, quick, together. They prepared to make their final rush, knowing they'd likely die in the doorway, but determined to take as many with them as possible. Clara thought of the river, of first kisses and promises made. At least she'd known love. At least she'd been free. Then, through the smoke and chaos, came a sound that didn't belong. A bugle call, clear and military. Shouts of alarm from outside, the thunder of many hooves. What in the hell? Ethan peered through a crack in the door. Cavalry. It's the damn cavalry. Through the smoke, Clara could see blue uniforms sweeping into the clearing. Morrison's remaining men scattered like leaves before a storm. A young officer's voice rang out, "Drop your weapons by order of the United States Army." Clara and Ethan stumbled out of the smoke-filled cabin, coughing and gasping. The clearing was chaos. Soldiers rounding up Morrison's men, medics tending to wounded, and standing with the officer, looking grimly satisfied, was Marshal Tom Baker from town. Cross Miss Mayfield. The marshal approached, tipping his hat. "Glad to see you're still breathing." "Marshal," Ethan said warily. He'd never had good experiences with lawmen. "What brings you here?" "Got word from the Cherokee that armed men were heading this way. They seem to think you might need help." Baker's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "The tribal elder, Joseph Crowfeather, spoke highly of you. Said you traded fair with them for years. And Morrison, Mr. Morrison is about to learn that whatever he might get away with in Denver, we don't cotton to slavery in this territory. The buying and selling of human beings, even under the guise of debt collection, is illegal." The marshal's expression hardened. "Plus, attacking citizens, attempted murder, arson, he'll be lucky if he doesn't hang." Clara saw Morrison being led away in irons, his expensive suit torn and dirty. He shot her a venomous look, but she felt no fear now. His power was broken. "You'll need to come to town, make statements," the marshal continued. "But I reckon your troubles with Morrison are over." As the soldiers dealt with the aftermath, the young officer approached. "Ma'am, sir, we have a medic who should look at those wounds." While the medic tended to Ethan's arm, Clara stood looking at their cabin. The north wall was charred but standing, the roof partially burned through. It would need work, but it had survived. "We can rebuild," Ethan said, reading her thoughts. He wrapped his good arm around her. "Make it stronger." "Yes," Clara agreed. "We can." Marshal Baker returned, looking somewhat embarrassed. "There's one more thing. Found this on Rodriguez." He held out a leather pouch. "The 30 silver pieces Morrison paid for you. Miss Mayfield, by rights, it's yours." Clara stared at the pouch as if it were a snake. The price of her bondage, the cost of her father's betrayal. "Give it to the church," she said finally. "For their work with orphans, some good should come from it." The marshal nodded approvingly. "You're a remarkable woman, Miss Mayfield. Cross is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Clara said, leaning into Ethan's embrace. As the cavalry prepared to depart with their prisoners, Joseph Crow. Feather himself rode into the clearing with several of his warriors. The old chief dismounted and approached Ethan, clasping his shoulder. "My friend," he said in accented English, "we heard gunfire. I'm glad you live." "Thanks to you," Ethan replied. "Your warning saved us." Joseph's dark eyes moved to Clara. "This is the woman who stands with you." "She is—" The chief studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "She has the spirit of a warrior." "You choose well." He reached into his pouch, drawing out a small beaded bag. "For your wedding. My wife made this. It carries our blessing for many years of happiness." Clara accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. "Thank you. We're honored." As the various groups departed, Clara and Ethan were left alone in their damaged but still standing home. The immediate danger had passed, but Clara knew the real victory was greater than just survival. "You know what this means," she said, surveying the damage that would need repair. "What's that?" "We'll have to postpone the wedding while we fix the cabin." Ethan turned her to face him, his eyes serious despite her light tone. "Not a chance. We'll go to town tomorrow, just as planned. Let people see that we're not hiding, not ashamed. Then we'll come home and rebuild as husband and wife." Clara touched his face, overwhelmed by love for this man who'd become everything to her. "I like the sound of that, husband and wife. They spent the rest of the day clearing debris and making the cabin habitable for the night. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, they sat on the porch despite the acrid smell of smoke. No more looking over our shoulders. Ethan said, "No more waiting for the past to catch up. From now on, we look forward." "To our future," Clara agreed, raising the cup of water in a toast. To our future. They had faced down their demons and won. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding, facing the town's gossip, creating a life together. But tonight, they were simply two people who had chosen each other against all odds, sitting on the porch of their battle-scarred home, watching the stars come out one by one in the vast Colorado sky. The river still sang in the distance, eternal and unchanging. It had witnessed their first kiss, and soon it would witness their new life as it truly began. No more running, no more hiding, just love, hard-won and unashamed, as solid as the mountains that sheltered them. The town of Cedar Ridge looked exactly as Clara remembered from her childhood visits. One main street of weathered storefronts, a church with a white steeple pointing toward heaven, and clusters of small houses spreading into the foothills. But riding in beside Ethan, no longer a girl, but a woman choosing her own path, everything seemed different. People stopped to stare as they passed. Clara held her head high, meeting their gazes directly. She wore her best dress, carefully mended after the flight through the woods, and Ethan had trimmed his beard and donned his cleanest shirt. They looked respectable, even if their story was anything but conventional. "There's gonna be talk," Ethan said quietly as they tied their horses outside the general store. "Let them talk," Clara replied, smoothing her skirts. "We have nothing to be ashamed of." Their first stop was the marshal's office to give their formal statements about Morrison's attack. Marshal Baker greeted them warmly, offering Clara a chair and coffee. "Morrison's being transferred to Denver for trial," he informed them. "With the Army's testimony and yours, he'll be looking at significant time in prison. His trafficking operation is finished." "And Rodriguez?" Ethan asked. "Survived his wound. He's turned witness against Morrison in exchange for a lighter sentence. Seems he's got quite a tale to tell about Morrison's operations." After completing the legal formalities, they made their way to the church. Reverend Matthews was in his small office, a thin man with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair. "Mr. Cross, Miss Mayfield," he greeted them, though his expression showed he'd heard the gossip. "How can I help you?" "We'd like to be married," Ethan said simply. "Today, if possible." The Reverend's eyebrows rose. "I see. And are you members of this congregation?" "No, sir," Clara said. "But we're believers, and we want to make our union proper in the eyes of God." Matthews leaned back in his chair, studying them. "I've heard stories, of course, about Morrison's men, about the attack on your cabin. Some say you were purchased, Miss Mayfield, that you ran away from a legal transaction." Clara felt Ethan tense beside her, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. "What happened to me was not legal. Reverend, my parents sold me to men who traffic in human misery. Mr. Cross saved my life and gave me shelter with no improper intentions. We fell in love honestly, and now we want to begin our life together with God's blessing. And you, Mr. Cross, I've heard stories about you as well, about a man killed back east." "I killed a man who brought disease to our town through his greed," Ethan said evenly. 23 people died because of him, including my first wife. I don't ask for your approval of my past actions, Reverend, only that you marry us now so we can build a better future." The Reverend was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "The Lord believes in redemption and new beginnings. Who am I to stand in the way of love honestly declared we'll need witnesses?" "We don't know many people in town," Clara admitted. "Then we'll ask whoever's willing." Matthew stood. "Come, let's see what we can arrange." Word spread quickly that a wedding was happening. By the time they reached the church proper, a small crowd had gathered. Some faces were disapproving, but others showed curiosity or even approval. Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry, volunteered to stand as a witness, as did Tom Baker, the marshal. "Takes courage, what you two are doing." "Mrs." Chen whispered to Clara as they prepared, facing down gossip with dignity. "I respect that." The ceremony was simple. Clara had no bouquet, no veil, no father to give her away, but she had Ethan waiting at the altar, his gray eyes warm with love and pride. She walked to him alone, claiming her choice with every step. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Matthews began, and Clara barely heard the familiar words. All her attention was on Ethan, the way his hand trembled slightly as he took hers, the intensity in his eyes as he spoke his vows. "I, Ethan Cross, take you, Clara Mayfield, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Clara's voice was clear and certain as she spoke her own vows. "I, Clara Mayfield, take you, Ethan Cross, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." They had no rings, but Ethan produced something else, Sarah's wedding band, which he'd kept all these years. "She would want it to have a new life," he said quietly, slipping it onto Clara's finger, "just as she'd want me to." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was tender and brief, mindful of their audience. But Clara felt the promise in it, the commitment to all the private moments to come. As they signed the register, making it official, Clara heard whispers from the gathered townspeople. "Seems like a love match, at least." "That poor girl, what she went through." Cross always was a strange one, living out there alone. "Good for them. I say, everyone deserves a second chance." Outside the church, Marshal Baker shook Ethan's hand. "Congratulations, you've got yourself a fine woman there." "I know it," Ethan replied, his arm around Clara's waist. "Word of advice. There's some in town who won't accept this easily. The Mayfields still have friends here, and they're spreading their version of events. You might face some unpleasantness." As if to prove his point, they encountered Clara's aunt, Martha Pritchard, outside the general store. The older woman's face contorted with disgust when she saw them. "Clara Mayfield, or should I say Cross, now have you no shame? Girl running off with a killer, bringing scandal on your family name." "My family sold me like property. Aunt Martha," Clara replied calmly. "I chose my own path. Chose to be a—" Martha bit off the ugly word, but her meaning was clear. "No decent person will receive you. You're ruined, and now you're dragging this man's reputation down with you." "Ma'am," Ethan said coldly, "I'd ask you to speak respectfully to my wife." "Your wife," Martha spat. "A bought girl playing at marriage. What happens when he tires of you? Clara, where will you go then?" Clara felt Ethan tense, ready to defend her honor more forcefully, but she squeezed his hand. This was her battle. "I'll go home," she said simply. "To the cabin my husband and I are rebuilding together. To the life we're making with our own hands. I'm not playing at anything. Aunt Martha, for the first time in my life, I'm truly living." She turned away from her aunt's sputtering response, and they continued their errands. At the general store, some customers pointedly turned their backs, while others nodded politely. Mr. Henderson, the proprietor, served them with professional courtesy. "Need supplies for rebuilding," Ethan explained, listing what they needed. "Heard about the fire. Shame. That." Henderson tallied their purchases. "You folks planning to stay in these parts?" It's our home," Clara said firmly. "We're not going anywhere." Henderson nodded slowly. "Well then, might I suggest some extra thick timber for those walls, and my wife makes quilts. Might be you'll need new bedding for your home." It was an olive branch, subtle but real. Clara smiled. "We'd appreciate that, Mr. Henderson." As they loaded their supplies, a young woman approached hesitantly. Clara recognized her. Susanna Walsh, the banker's daughter, someone she'd known slightly in childhood. Mrs. Cross. Susanna twisted her hands nervously. "I wanted to say, what happened to you wasn't right. Your parents shouldn't have... Well, I'm glad you found happiness. That's all." She hurried away before Clara could respond, but the words warmed her heart. Not everyone would condemn them. Their last stop was the cemetery on the hill overlooking town. Ethan led her to a simple stone marked Sarah Cross, beloved wife. "I wanted you to see," he said quietly. "To know where she rests. She's part of my past, and that past made me who I am." Clara knelt and placed a small bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked on the way to town. "Thank you," she whispered to the stone, "for loving him first, for teaching him how to love. I'll take care of him now." They stood together in the peaceful cemetery, hands linked, acknowledging the past while facing the future. The ride home was quiet, both processing the events of the day. As they crested the final ridge and saw their cabin below, damaged but standing, Clara felt a surge of emotion. "No regrets?" Ethan asked, reading her mood. "None. Only that I didn't marry you sooner." They spent their wedding night in their partially repaired cabin, with stars visible through the holes in the roof. It wasn't the wedding night most girls dreamed of, but Clara wouldn't have traded it for anything. They came together as equals, as partners who had chosen each other despite everything the world had thrown at them. The next morning, as they shared breakfast and planned the day's repairs, a rider approached. Clara tensed, but it was only young Timothy Chen, Mrs. Chen's son. "Ma sent these," he said shyly, handing over a basket. "Wedding gifts from some folks in town. Said to tell you not everyone listens to gossip." Inside the basket were preserves, fresh bread, a small sewing kit, and several other household items. Tucked at the bottom was a note in Mrs. Chen's careful handwriting for new beginnings. "See?" Ethan said, reading over her shoulder. "We're not as alone as we thought." Clara wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. "We'll make them proud. We'll build something good here. Show them all that love can triumph over prejudice." "We already have," Ethan said, pulling her close. "Every day we choose each other. We prove them wrong." As Timothy rode away, they returned to their work, side by side. The cabin would be rebuilt stronger than before. Their reputation would be slowly restored through honest living and quiet dignity. And their love, tested by fire and storm, would only grow deeper with each passing season. Clara Cross, she loved the sound of her new name, looked at her husband wielding a hammer in the morning sun, and smiled. They had faced society's judgment and emerged unbowed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them together, as they had met everything else. The wedding ring, worn smooth by its first owner, caught the light on Clara's finger. Old love blessing new love. Past and future joined in an unbroken circle. It was more than she had ever dared dream when she was just a frightened girl sold by her parents. Now she was a woman who had claimed her own destiny, married to a man who saw her strength and honored it. "Ready to get back to work, Mrs. Cross?" Ethan called. "Ready for anything, Mr. Cross," she replied, and meant it. Their new life had officially begun. Spring melted into summer, and the Colorado mountains dressed themselves in wildflowers and birdsong. The cabin stood stronger than before, its walls reinforced, its roof solid and weatherproof. Clara paused in hanging laundry to admire their handiwork, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on the gentle swell of her belly. 3 months married, and already their life together had taken root in the most literal way. She hadn't told Ethan yet, waiting for the right moment, savoring the secret knowledge that their love had created something new. "Clara, come quick." Ethan's voice carried urgency, but not alarm. She found him by the corral, grinning broadly as he pointed to their mare. "She foaled in the night. Look." A spindly-legged colt stood on wobbling legs beside its mother, all knees and curiosity. Clara laughed in delight as the baby horse took a few stumbling steps. "He's perfect," she breathed. "What should we name him?" "That's your department, Mrs. Cross. I just deliver them into the world." She studied the colt's markings, a white star on his forehead, 4 white socks. Hope, she decided, because that's what he represents. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head. "Good name, fitting for more reasons than you know." "Oh, had a visitor while you were sleeping. Joseph Crowfeather's son. The Army's established a new fort about 40 miles north. They're looking for reliable suppliers. Meat, horses, leather goods. Joseph recommended us." Clara turned in his arms. "Us, but they must know your history." "Apparently, Marshal Baker put in a good word, said we're honest folk who deserve a fresh start." His eyes were bright with possibility. "It's steady income. Clara, enough to build a real horse operation here, maybe even add on to the cabin." "More rooms would be useful," Clara said carefully, "especially if our family grows." Ethan was already nodding, missing her hint entirely. "Exactly. Storage rooms, maybe a proper workshop." Clara laughed and took his hand, placing it on her belly. "I was thinking more of a nursery." His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Clara, are you—" "Late November, near as I can figure, you're going to be a father again. Ethan Cross." For a moment, he stood frozen, a mix of joy and old pain flickering across his face. Then he dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her belly. "I won't fail this time," he whispered. "I swear it. I'll keep you both safe." Clara ran her fingers through his hair. "We'll keep each other safe. That's what partners do." News of her pregnancy changed the rhythm of their days. Ethan became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from lifting anything heavier than a coffee pot. Clara bore it with amused patience, understanding the fear behind his fussing. Their first delivery to the fort went smoothly. Captain Morrison, no relation to their tormentor, proved to be a fair man who paid promptly and placed a standing order for monthly supplies. On the ride home, their saddlebags heavy with payment, they stopped in town for provisions. The change was subtle but noticeable. Where before they'd been met with cold shoulders and whispers, now there were nods of acknowledgement, even a few smiles. "Mrs." Chen pressed a package of herbs into Clara's hands. "For the baby." And Henderson's wife shyly offered to teach Clara her quilting patterns. Amazing what honest work and time can do, Ethan mused as they rode home. "And a baby," Clara added. "Nothing softens hearts like new life coming into the world." Summer passed in a blur of activity. The horse herd grew as Ethan traded with the Cherokee for breeding stock. Clara tended an expanded garden, preserved food for winter, and felt the baby grow strong within her. In the evenings, they'd sit by the river, their river, where so much had begun, and plan for the future. "I want our child to know both worlds," Clara said one evening, watching the sunset paint the water gold, the town and the wilderness, to be at home in both. "They'll know love," Ethan replied. "Everything else, we'll figure out as we go." The first frost came early, and with it, an unexpected visitor. Clara was working on baby clothes when she heard a horse approaching. Through the window, she saw a woman dismounting, middle-aged, travel-worn, with graying hair and a hesitant manner. Clara grabbed the rifle from its place by the door, though something about the woman seemed more sad than threatening. "Can I help you?" she called from the porch. The woman looked up, and Clara gasped. Despite the years and hardship etched on her face, the resemblance was unmistakable. "Clara," her mother whispered, "my baby girl." Margaret Mayfield looked older, smaller, as if life had compressed her. She stood at the edge of the yard like she wasn't sure of her welcome. "What are you doing here?" Clara's voice came out harder than intended. I heard about the wedding, about the baby." Tears tracked down Margaret's weathered cheeks. "I had to see you, to try to explain." "Explain?" Anger flared in Clara's chest. "Explain how you let Father sell me like livestock, how you stood there crying but did nothing." I know what we did was unforgivable." Margaret took a shaky step forward. "Your father's dead. Clara drank himself to death 2 months ago. His last words were about the 30 pieces of silver. He never spent them. Just stared at them like they were snakes." Clara felt Ethan's presence behind her before his hand touched her shoulder. He'd returned from the far pasture, drawn by voices. "Mrs. Mayfield," he said coolly. Margaret flinched. "Mr. Cross, I thank you for saving her, for giving her what I couldn't." "What do you want?" Clara asked, the rifle heavy in her hands. "Nothing, just to see you, to know you're well, and to give you this." Margaret held out a wrapped bundle. "Your grandmother's christening gown. I saved it all these years. Every baby in our family wore it, including you. I thought, maybe." Clara stared at the bundle, remembering her grandmother's gentle hands, the one source of unconditional love in her childhood. Slowly, she lowered the rifle. "You can't stay," she said firmly. "What's done is done, but you can see the house. Have some water before you go." It was more than Margaret had dared hope for. She followed them inside, taking in the cozy cabin, the obvious care in every corner. Her eyes lingered on Clara's rounded belly. "When?" "November. You look well. Happy." Margaret's voice broke. "That's all I wanted to know, that you found happiness despite what we did to you." They sat in awkward silence while Margaret sipped water. Finally, she rose to leave. "I won't trouble you again," she said at the door. "But Clara, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I was weak and afraid, and I failed you. I'll carry that weight till I die." Clara watched her mother mount her horse, looking frail and defeated. Something shifted in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of old anger. "Mother," she called. Margaret turned, hope flickering in her eyes. "The baby will wear grandmother's gown. Thank you for saving it." Margaret nodded, unable to speak through her tears, and rode away. "You all right?" Ethan asked, pulling Clara close. "I think so. I don't forgive them. But I don't need to carry the hate anymore. We have too much good in our lives for that." November brought the first heavy snows, and with them, Clara's time. The labor started at dawn, and Ethan rode hard for town to fetch Mrs. Chen, who served as midwife. By the time they returned, Clara was deep in the rhythm of birth, drawing on the same strength that had carried her through blizzards and gunfights. "You're doing fine, Mrs. Chen soothed. "Baby's coming just right." Ethan hovered anxiously until Clara grabbed his hand. "Don't you dare faint on me. Ethan Cross, I need you here." He stayed, coaching her through each wave, and when their son finally arrived, healthy, loud, and perfect, Ethan wept openly. "He's beautiful," he whispered, touching the baby's tiny fist. "Clara, he's perfect." They named him Samuel Joseph. Samuel for new beginnings, Joseph for the Cherokee chief who'd helped save them. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined chin, and from his first breath, he owned their hearts completely. Winter passed in a blur of feedings and diapers, of marveling at tiny fingers and first smiles. The cabin that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with life. Friends from town visited, bringing gifts and staying for coffee. Even some who'd initially shunned them came around, won over by the simple reality of a family making their way with dignity and love. Spring returned to the mountains, and with it, a letter that made Clara laugh out loud. Morrison had been convicted and sentenced to 20 years hard labor. His criminal empire had crumbled, his victims freed to build new lives. "It's over," Ethan said, reading over her shoulder. "Really, truly over?" Clara shifted baby Samuel to her other arm and leaned into her husband. "No, not over. That was all prologue. Our real story. It's just beginning." They walked down to the river, the baby cooing at the play of sunlight on water. This same river had witnessed so much: a first kiss, promises made, love declared. Now it witnessed something even more precious, a family whole and happy. No longer running from the past, but building toward the future. Ethan skimmed a stone across the water, and Clara laughed at his boyish grin. Samuel gurgled, waving his fists at the sparkling ripples. High above, an eagle circled, riding the thermals toward distant peaks. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, wrapping his arms around both wife and child. Clara considered all they'd been through, the fear, the violence, the struggle to be accepted. Then she looked at what they'd built: love, trust, family, community. The scales didn't just balance, they tipped overwhelmingly toward joy. "I'm thinking," she said, tilting her face up to the warm spring sun, "that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations." Amen to that, Mrs. Cross. They stood there by the river as the afternoon light grew golden. No longer the broken souls who'd found each other in a snowstorm, but partners who'd chosen to build something lasting. Behind them, their cabin stood strong against the mountain backdrop. Before them, the river sang its eternal song, and in their arms, their son reached toward the future with tiny, perfect hands. The virgin's first kiss had led to so much more than either could have imagined that day by the water. It had led to a love that conquered fear, a partnership that weathered storms, and a family that proved sometimes the most unlikely beginnings create the strongest foundations. In the vast wilderness of the Colorado mountains, two hearts had found home in each other, and that, perhaps, was the greatest adventure of all. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Ethan's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please leave a comment below, and let's connect over our shared love of these frontier tales. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more passionate tales from the American frontier. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these stories of courage, love, and redemption in the Old West. Until next time, partners.